Hey everyone, welcome to the Business Growth Pod. I'm your host, Allan Draper. As always, excited for this episode. I'm excited for our guest today. A little different than we've had in the past, which I think is always a great idea. Getting kind of a fresh perspective. Before we jump into that, make sure you go to my website, allandraper.com. I'm helping startup entrepreneurs. That's what I do. Schedule an appointment with me. Let me know how I can help you get your business off the ground. So I focus on entrepreneurs that are 6 months before starting their business up until about 2 years or so after, and really helping them scale their businesses. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to John Climaco. John's the CEO of CNS Pharmaceuticals, which is a publicly traded company. And they're engaged in the research and development of new treatments for malignancies of the brain and central nervous system. Okay. And John is also a seasoned entrepreneur. He's an executive. He's an attorney. We'll probably talk about that a little bit, and a director. And he has a distinctive record of business success, more than 15 years. So, yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show, John. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So let's, I'm an attorney. My license is still active, but I don't practice. What was it that, made you clearly don't practice anymore? What made you kind of transition from being an attorney? Did you ever practice?
I did practice. Yeah, I practiced for 7 years. I started practicing briefly in Silicon Valley, and then we moved to Utah and took a position with a big corporate firm here. And I practiced for quite some time here.
Gotcha. And so what was it and how long did you practice after law school?
7 years.
7 years. Okay. Longer than I did. I lasted about 3 or 4.
Right.
And to be honest, I didn't, like, a lot of people say, hey, did you hate practicing law, or, why did you leave? And it wasn't like that for me. I practiced commercial litigation, which I thought was exciting and really pushed me.
Right.
But I like being an entrepreneur more.
My whole practice, I was working on emerging growth companies so working with entrepreneurs. I'd been an entrepreneur before I went to law school. I started a business before I went to law school. And, so it was just a natural fit for me. And I went to law school in San Francisco in the late 90s. And so kind of internet, 1.0. And
wow.
A lot of my work was with emerging growth companies. And a lot of them were biotech based companies. So I was exposed to all kinds of stuff. And it sounds like you had the same experience, right? I actually loved it. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I felt like I was getting paid to think and solve problems, which was fun, and help, entrepreneurs avoid problems and build companies on a sound footing. And in retrospect, it was probably no surprise that eventually I encountered a client who had an idea that I thought was cool, and that he did not necessarily know how to grow into a company. And since, when I met him, I had been doing that for several years already. I was counseling him step by step as to how to get this thing off the ground, and we ended up together working on, raising a bunch of, first seed money, and then venture money, and then major corporate money. And at that point, the company, sort of the investors around the table basically said, hey, this company needs a CEO full time. And that kind of sounds like what John's doing, even though he's technically the attorney. Maybe we should make John the CEO. So that was kind of how it happened. And it was weird because I didn't really think about leaving the law at that point, but I was having so much fun doing this. And my partners, my law partners were sort of tired of me doing both. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to, to their shock and disappointment, I said, I'm going to run this company. And that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a lot of careers out there that I think pigeonhole is a little bit of a strong word, but they kind of push us in a direction, being a physician, any type of professional degree.
Right.
And not a lot of lawyers, some people go to law school knowing, hey, I'm going to start a business or I'm going to be an executive or something.
Right.
But the people that I went to law school to be a lawyer,
Yeah.
and the people that go to law school to be a lawyer, it's really hard for them. And these other professions that I'm talking about, go to these other professional schools, it's really hard for them to break away from that, right?
Yeah.
It's a well-paying job. It's, prestigious. It's,
Right.
comfortable job. It's not hard labor. You can really control a lot of aspects of it.
Right.
But I got to the point, John, where I was like, did I go to law school when these entrepreneurial opportunities came up? I had to answer this question that I asked myself, and that is, did I go to law school to make my life better and increase my opportunities, or did I go to law school to become a lawyer? And the answer was clear, right? So because I knew that it was not a stepping stone, but to help me, means to some other end, it wasn't that tough of a decision. But I have quite a few listeners that they're trying to pull the trigger, John.
Yeah.
They have a good, sometimes the good stable jobs where you're making good money, those are the toughest to leave, to
Right. Yeah, totally.
to hang a shingle or to go out on. Those are the toughest ones. What is it? What's the thought process that encourages somebody to take the leap?
I think first of all, that's exactly my exactly the calculus that I went through. And like I said, I mean, I really enjoyed the practice, and I really enjoyed many of the people that I worked with. In particular, I had a senior partner, who was my mentor, and then became my partner when I made partner in the firm that we were with, and we had the kind of working relationship that I really like. It was very honest. It was pretty raw at times. We were doing a lot of, very large deals and stressful deals. And we kind of operated as our own almost entrepreneurial shop inside the firm. We had 3 or 4 lawyers, working together on all this stuff. And it was super intense, and we brought in tons of business, and I really enjoyed it. But at the end of the day, I found that a lot of my other partners did not share that kind of growth mentality. They shared the sort of, I got into this for, it's a stable job, it's a good job, I can make pretty decent money, et cetera, et cetera. And I've just always been about growth and building stuff. I love that. And, it's kind of one of those things, I think you must have it inside. If you have it inside you, you've got it. You could be in a huge organization. You're always thinking, oh, I could improve this, or I could do this, or I could build this, or I could take this and expand this. And not everybody thinks that way. And for me, when I sort of really bumped into it, I was like, I can do both. I can practice law and help build this company and whatever. But when I saw that my partners, some of them just did not see the world that way. They saw it as sort of, this is a profession, and I show up and I do my job and then I leave. And for me, it was like, and it still is the way my career is, it's 24/7. I'm just always thinking about it, doing it, what have you. I realized that in order to achieve satisfaction for myself, to have that feeling like I was pushing as hard as I could and growing as much as I could and building as much as I could, I was going to have to leave, the environment that I was in and do it somewhere else. So it was a leap for sure. But I felt like when the time came to really make the choice, and my partners literally laid it on the line. They were like, well, you have to choose. And it was, it was a partnership meeting. So I had a whole bunch of people in the conference room, and I was on the agenda, and there it was. And one of the partners, the senior partners of the firm, said, well, you have to choose. And I said, okay. And I just stood up, and they were like, what? And I said, well, I got to go draft my resignation. I'm sorry. I really like you guys, but you asked me to choose. So I'm choosing. That was it. And I left.
Yeah. No, it's true. There's, when you're an entrepreneur, you don't look at a job as, hey, I clock in and I clock out.
Yeah, you can't.
But there are people that do that. And
sure. And that's fine, right? There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a choice, and I just wasn't cut out for that mentality. I mean, I came from I came from an entrepreneurial background in my family. And so starting your own thing was kind of the norm, not the
Mm-hmm.
exception.
Yeah.
And, and it was like, okay, as I said, I mean, I had done it, when I was younger, and then here came, this opportunity to put all the skills that I'd learned as a lawyer. I mean, my job, it was a corporate lawyer, right? So I was building companies, trying to avoid litigation, helping, my clients raise capital, putting their deals together, and so on and so forth. So it was like, well, I have all these tools and skill set, and here's an opportunity that needs them. And then it became, here's an opportunity that you created that really needs someone just like you. And you know this job better than anybody because you helped build the company. So that was
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. As you're talking, kind of going through my head is what are some of these qualifications that separate an employee from an entrepreneur? And again, it's more about personality and what an individual wants to achieve than right or wrong. It's not necessarily,
Right.
and I don't try to, there's a couple of things I don't advise on. I don't tell people really where to put their money. I don't really tell them how much risk to take on. I don't give marital advice. That's not really my thing.
Right.
So for our listeners, one is we talked about it. Hey, are you a clock in, clock out person? Where
Right.
at the end of the day, that's how my mom is.
Yeah.
She clocked out and she was done. She went home to her kids. She wanted to focus 100% on her kids.
Right.
And that was great for us. Are you
Right.
a clock in, clock out person? Or are you the type of person that's always grinding? I don't have to work financially. I don't anymore.
Yep.
But I do this for fun. So this is one of my hobbies is building businesses. So, what would you do if you didn't have to work? Right. What is your risk tolerance? Because there's some people that may answer, hey, I'm not a clock in, clock out person. I'm kind of always on the proverbial clock.
Right.
I would do it even though I didn't have to for money, but man, I've got, small kids. I got bills. So the risk, I'm pretty low risk tolerance. What other questions are you going to ask somebody if they come to you, John, and they're like, hey, I'm thinking about starting a business? What are there any other factors? Am I missing anything there?
I mean, I think that risk question is an interesting one because, my take on risk is maybe a little different than other people's. So I'm a lifelong climber. That's really
okay.
like, if we weren't talking about this, we'd be talking about that. And that's all about managing risk. And, I've led all kinds of expeditions all over the world, in the Himalayas, and the Arctic, and the Andes, and you name it. And I think that that kind of informs my approach to risk in the sense that I'm always thinking about, what is the risk landscape? And people sometimes, I think, really misidentify the risk. So for example, I think if somebody came and was talking about that and they were leaving a quote unquote stable job, I always ask people, well, what does that mean, a stable job today? Are you really certain that it's stable? Are you so you work for a huge company, so are you 100% certain that the division you work for is going to be sold tomorrow to somebody else who's going to cut your job because you're just a number to them? Those kinds of risks, right? There's always a risk in, anytime you choose to do something, you're automatically, I would say really choosing not to do something else, right? So if you choose to stay put in this quote unquote stable job, the risk is, well, what is the opportunity that I'm missing? And what control am I ceding over my destiny by staying in this position that's controlled entirely by someone else? Even though I may think it's controlled by my performance and my great reviews and this and that, the bottom line is, and we've all seen many examples of it, if you haven't experienced it personally, there's a risk that you just don't even see coming. And one of the things that I love about, sort of creating entrepreneurial opportunities is some of that now risk comes back on me. And I am always a person who, if I'm going to bet, I'll bet on myself. Because I know I'm going to work harder than anybody else, and I know I'm going to stay more focused, and I know I'm going to want it more if I've committed to it. And so, I think those sometimes are risk equations that people don't think about. When I started, when I left the practice, my son was 3. So I just didn't really think about it as in that way. I thought, well, this is an opportunity with unlimited upside, and I'm going to be in as much control over protecting against the downside as possible. And I'm going to have control over my own time. And I'm a person, as I said, that it's a 24/7 job. So that means, well, if I want to spend a few hours with my kid during the day, I can. Just means I'll just be working later tonight, and nobody's going to ask to see me in the office or whatever, because I'm in control of that piece of the culture. And eliminating that risk that maybe my lifestyle choices are going to irritate somebody and they're going to ask me to leave or something like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, you brought up a couple of good points. A lot of people don't think of opportunity cost they don't add that into the risk assessment.
Right. Exactly.
Which is a huge mistake, because
right?
Because it's like, okay, yeah, on one side, maybe I don't have a quote unquote stable paycheck, whatever the banks and the government have led us to,
Right.
define that for us. But when you're toward the end of your life, and we always regret. So there were these studies done with people that were dying, right?
Right.
And they found out that people regretted on average a lot more the things they didn't do than the things that they did do.
Totally. And I say that all the time. It's, if you ask me, what are the, if I, for example, I mean, again, to touch on climbing, it would be, I've had great successes and I've had some spectacular failures and disasters, and we'll say, oh, what was the biggest, regret? And for me, it's always, it's the expedition I didn't go on. It's the one that I said, no, I can't, because I got to do this, that, or the other thing, or it's the thing I didn't try, and I think that's a huge thing. What a terrible thing to carry through life. If you've got something that's burning in you to do, you should do it. And, and so much of that, if you have that entrepreneurial spirit, like I said at the beginning, and you know it, if you have that desire to build something, I think the risk is not doing that, because, this isn't a dress rehearsal, right? This is the only go around we get. So as far as we know, so, I feel like, you don't want to take ridiculous risks, and you want to manage the risks, and you want to understand the risks, but just being alive is a risk. So, you have to weigh those opportunity costs all the time, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Well, let's shift gears here a little bit, John. Tell me about what you guys are doing at CNS and some of the projects you're working on and what your vision is with that company. And let's get into that a little bit.
Sure. So we are a drug development company, an oncology drug development company, and we are working in one of the most challenging areas of oncology. It's neuro-oncology, and specifically, we are working on glioblastoma, which is the most common and deadly form of primary brain cancer. So this is the cancer that killed John McCain. It killed Joe Biden's son. It killed the president of the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas, which is where our technologies come from. That's the largest cancer research institute in the world. So if you can imagine that, this disease can kill people like that who have access to the greatest resources in the world, it will kill anyone. And it's a devastating disease. There is no cure. There is really sort of only one very limited opportunity for chemotherapy. And we are developing a drug that our founder, Dr. Valdemar Priebe, who's a professor at MD Anderson, developed. And it's a very exciting compound, could be a game changer for glioblastoma. It's a class of drugs. It's a member of a class of drugs called anthracyclines. They're the most common form of chemotherapy drug in the world. They're used, if you get breast cancer, ovarian cancer, testicular cancer, lung cancer, they're going to give you an anthracycline as first-line therapy. So what's the problem with anthracyclines and glioblastoma? It's that they don't cross the blood-brain barrier. That's this, protective shell of cells around the brain that keep our, brain safe from harmful substances. So Dr. Priebe created an anthracycline that actually does cross the blood-brain barrier. And what that means for neuro-oncologists is, if you think of, imagine being a carpenter that couldn't use a hammer. Well, that's what a neuro-oncologist is with anthracyclines. It's the go-to tool in the toolbox of oncologists, but the neuro-oncologists can't use them inside the brain because of the blood-brain barrier. Our hammer, berubicin it's called, crosses the blood-brain barrier. So we give potentially neuro-oncologists the opportunity to use their tool of choice from a chemotherapy toolbox perspective in the brain. It had a very successful phase 1 study. Very close to half of the patients had a positive response to this drug. And we are now conducting a global phase 2, potentially pivotal study, which means that this study has been specifically designed that if it is successful and meets its primary endpoint, this should be an approvable drug. So we're right in the thick of it right now. And it's absolutely, it's the most exciting thing I've ever done professionally. Yeah, it's really, really fun and really cool, because if we're successful, we will definitely change the way brain cancer is treated worldwide.
That's crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, the impact, right? That gives you a good reason to get out of bed in the morning.
You got it. That's what I always say. I just couldn't be more motivated. I mean, you talk to any of our patients or their families or the scores of hundreds of patients that come to us from around the world, and oh my God, you count your blessings that you don't have to deal with this personally, but it's just a mission to help these people, because there's nothing else. And it's such an elegantly simple story. There have been some incredible advancements in immuno-oncology and different types of treatments, and all of them have failed in this space. And I love how simple this story really is at its heart. So, that's what I'm doing. And we are, as I said, we're in the thick of it right now. We have a fantastic team that is executing this study primarily here and in Europe, but also in the Australia Pacific region as well, drawing on patients from around the world, ultimately to demonstrate that this drug is safe and effective.
That's awesome. That's incredible. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I imagine there was this process of, raising capital or,
Right.
Deciding how you're going to fund these, fund the research and the development of this product.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about that. What, give our listeners here some pointers on maybe some goods and some bads of that process that you experienced.
Sure. So I'll kind of go back to the beginning, even before I was involved, because I think it's important for this audience to understand what it takes to do something like this. So our founder developed the drug at MD Anderson. The institution actually initially, completely refused to patent it. They have hundreds, thousands of compounds and ideas go through that place all the time. I went through the intellectual property committee at MD Anderson, and they passed. So our founder took out another mortgage on his house in Houston. Wow. Without telling his wife.
Wow.
And financed the prosecution of the initial patents around the drug many years ago. So he was as committed to his idea as possible. It went through a number of different iterations and sponsors, and eventually the phase 1 study was completed. The drug clearly had efficacy. It was shown to work. It actually took one patient from probably the last few weeks of his life to when he enrolled in this clinical trial. His cancer went, after many treatments with this drug, went into complete remission, and he's still alive today, which is almost unheard of for glioblastoma. Jeez. So I was put in connection with Dr. Prive through a number of different folks, and we found that we kind of had the same zeal for this sort of project. And I had built another medical technology company from the ground up, and took it through multiple venture rounds, partnership with Johnson & Johnson that ultimately sold our product, and then we sold the company. And so I kind of had a feeling that I understood how to do this sort of thing, and I felt like this was the type of project that I was looking for, something that had tremendous potential, high risk area that had been maybe overlooked. And so I said, okay, let me give this a go. So we raised some capital initially from some friendly high net worth individuals, and then from there we built out a team. We built out the story. We built out the IP. We built out the clinical plan, how we were going to go forward, and then we hit the street, and we did a number of sort of some smaller financings, but we specifically avoided venture just because, experience in venture was not uniformly positive. And I felt like in the past, and so did Dr. Prive, that too much had been given away to early venture partners who didn't really add the kind of value that they should have. I mean, I think venture has a place, and for if especially sort of at the top of the venture universe, those type of funds can really add a lot of value. But if you're not getting the attention of those funds, and we weren't, we felt like going public was going to be the best route for us. So that's what we did. We had a very small IPO, still as complicated as doing a huge one, but we had a small IPO. We raised some capital on that just before the pandemic hit. And then from there, we've done a couple of other, larger follow-on rounds. But we've kept the company pretty lean and mean. We're a very small shop. We've outsourced some of our work to a contract research organization, which is pretty common in the pharma business. And, I think that we've proven that with the right team and the right amount of capital kind of judiciously employed, you can actually do this kind of development work. So as I said, we really went in about 3 years. We've gone from more or less what was a concept, essentially we knew how, we had some data that we owned. We had the rights to the compound. We knew how to manufacture the compound. We needed the capital to put it all together and start a clinical trial, bring it to the FDA, get approval to start the trial and go forward. And we've done all that now. And
that's impressive.
It's just, it's an effort, I think, in my experience as especially as a med tech development entrepreneur, which is what I did for 10 years, is you've just got to stay totally focused on your goal. You've got to identify what is going to be the goal and the output that's going to change the game, that's either going to change clinical behavior or that's going to lead to an approval, and then just stay focused on that no matter what. And that's kind of what we've done, and that's how we got here. So
that's awesome. So for the people listening that are trying to decide, and it's probably at a much smaller scale, which is fine, because there's still a lot of the same things to think about.
Sure.
But they're trying to decide between, hey, I could bootstrap this,
right?
Whatever my idea is, it's going to take me a few extra years, or I could go look for money. What are the things that somebody in that situation should consider when making the decision of, hey, maybe I just, retained earnings, pump profits back into the company for marketing or R&D or whatever, versus let me look outside for some monetary help?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've got to understand what is sort of the, if you're considering bringing on capital, what are the inflection points that capital could help you reach faster, and what would the achievement of those inflection points do for the business? Because there's definitely some businesses that, I mean, look, right, it's obviously better as an entrepreneur if you can, keep it yourself.
Right.
But there's a cost to those years that it's going to take to bootstrap and build on yourself. Someone else with better financing, could they get a hold of you? Could they get better product development done? Could they secure better locations? Could they secure better distribution? And sometimes the cost of taking on some capital is less than the cost of waiting and potentially losing those things to a competitor. In our case, it was a pretty easy decision in the sense that, drug development is hugely expensive. So, you're going to have to take on capital. It's really just a question of when and from whom. But I think, that sort of more fundamental binary question, do I do it or do I not do it? The question is really, is the money that you take on going to bring you to a point where that you either couldn't get to otherwise, or you're going to get to so much faster that you'll be able to secure a better, more competitive position by doing it? And I think if you sort of focus on what, as opposed to sort of, should I take it on or not, what's it really going to do for me, where's it going to get me, and what is the cost to my ownership worth that? I think that's where the answer lies for most businesses.
Yeah, that's interesting. Great, great analysis there. And sometimes I wish I had a crystal ball, right, to know. And you're a lot of things, you got to do your research and figure out, be specific about how the money's going to be used and where, where you're hoping it will take you.
Right.
But at the end, it's just another form of risk, right?
That's right. That's right.
And I think a helpful part of the analysis is, well, what are my objectives? What's my vision for a company like yours? It's like, man, the sooner we get this to market, the more lives we save.
That's right. Exactly.
Right. But other entrepreneurs, maybe they're developing something else, or it's a service business or a restaurant or something.
Right.
And they have, I don't know, they have mom's recipes, and they're like, you know what? I'm going to pass this business on to my kids. I want my kids to work in the restaurant. And so when you're talking about, at least from my perspective, John, when you're talking about, hey, am I going to raise money? Am I going to, borrow money? Am I going to, sell equity, whatever? First think about, where do you want to be in 5-10 years? Like, what's the vision of the company?
Exactly.
And use that to help you make that decision, because we don't have the crystal ball. So at the end of the day, if you make a mistake, or maybe you veer off course a little bit, you can kind of go back to, hey, this was the vision and I was trying to stay true to it, and whatever that's worth.
I think that's exactly right. Because there are, as you said, there's different kinds of businesses. I mean, there's businesses where growth is everything. And then there's businesses that are more of a lifestyle business, or you're trying to build something that has a specific purpose and function in your life or your family's life, or with you and your partner, or something like that, And again, I think you still have to go through that same calculus and ask yourself, as you said, what is the goal? And then, can this money get me closer to that goal faster? Exactly. Or do I have the opportunity to chip away at that myself without ceding any control or any upside to someone, And I think, that last piece it's hard, because you've also got to watch for the trap of not thinking that you've got to hold everything so close, because, in our business and the kind of business that I'm in, the old saw, I believe, is very true, which is, it's much better to have a small piece of an enormous game-changing pie than to have the whole, thing of nothing yourself, because the world is filled, and you meet them when you go to conferences or you're in these type of fields, you meet them who have held on to everything and gone nowhere, because they can't harness the resources, whether it's the human capital or the monetary capital, to grow and even to move the business forward. And it requires, some businesses, sure, you can create entirely yourself, but a lot of them, you're going to have to, let's say it's even your restaurant, right? I have a number of friends who are restaurateurs, and, under the right circumstances, many of them have given equity to key members of the team. And why would they do that? Well, because if you realize, for example, you've got a GM that is incredible, well, you don't want to lose that person.
Exactly.
Those people are not a dime a dozen. They can't be replaced, and they can be so pivotal to the growth of your business. For example, I have a friend who owns a few restaurants here in Utah, and he's done that very successfully. And why has he done that? Well, because his shops are pretty they're in the same general region, but he can't be in all of them at the same day. It can't happen. But he's got a GM now that has skin in the game, and that allows him to turn away from one shop toward another and focus totally as the founder and the entrepreneur on the place that needs him the most. Meanwhile, the shop that's humming along, why is it humming along? Because he's got a GM who can keep his eyes on that all day long. And did that cost him a point or two? It did, but it's the cheapest success that he's ever had, because he's got somebody he can trust, who he's given a piece of the pie to make sure that their incentives are completely aligned.
I love it. Yeah, it's, we always talk about making sure that, working toward this ideal of getting employees to think like owners. And maybe the best way to get them there is some type of profit sharing or, equity sharing. So totally. I agree 100%. Well, John, this has been fantastic. Where do people reach out to you to learn more about CNS and all the incredible things you guys are accomplishing?
Yeah, sure. So they can go to CNS Pharmaceuticals or cnspharma.com. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram. We're kind of all over the place. We put out a fair amount of news on the company as well on those places, so you can see all about what we're doing. We trade on NASDAQ under the ticker CNSP, and so it's easy to find us.
Love it. Well, thanks for your time, John. This has been very enlightening, and best of luck in all your future endeavors.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the conversation.
If you have enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a rating. And for daily inspiration and business tips, follow Allan on Instagram. Until next time, remember, we build the future one entrepreneur at a time.